Welcome to Fossils and Fiction, a podcast exploring cultural and scientific ideas about dinosaurs. My guest this week is Trish Sloan from the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum in Winton, Queensland. Trish is the collection manager at the Australian Age of Dinosaurs. Trish, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, you're the collections manager at the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum of Natural History, which is quite a long title. But how do you describe your role there?
My role's it's the same as every other collection manager in a museum, but I have, a really unique portfolio of training tour guides and other bits and pieces around the museum. So my main role is obviously managing our fossil collection, and a big part of my profile is overseeing the fossils being prepared in our lab. And then leading on from that, I then assist any research associates or researchers based on our fossils, or perhaps they want to do comparisons. So I help with that in the application process. And then just a lot of metadata. So making sure that we've got the correct metadata, the cataloguing and archiving of museum artefacts or Winton artefacts. It's and photography. So it is quite broad ranged. And then add museum photographer on top of that, and it's a big role.
They keep you busy.
Yeah.
The museum itself, could you tell us a little bit about the Australian Age of Dinosaurs?
So the Australian Age of Dinosaurs, is a relatively new museum. However, we're growing really, really fast, and the museum's based around Australian dinosaurs, obviously, and we're working towards building a big natural history museum that will showcase, billions of years of Australian natural history. So if you're familiar with the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller, Canada, so if we could say we'll be the Australian version of that museum, then that's sort of what we're trying to achieve. So along with that, obviously, we're all about visitor experience. So there's something that this museum creates is an opportunity for people to get to see real dinosaur bones. They're not behind glass windows. They're not locked up. They're not fully a secret. And we want to educate and get all of this Australian dinosaur knowledge out there. So we're very heavily focused on our customer service and visitor experience. And I think that's one of the big, amazing things about the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum.
Great. And one of the programs that you offer to get people involved is called Dig a Dino, which I love the alliteration of.
Yeah.
What do participants in that program get to do?
Yeah, so Dig a Dino is a participant program. So people pay to go out for a week on whatever property we're digging on at the time. And from pretty much, I'm going to say daylight till dark because that's what it feels like, we will go in search of dinosaur remains in the ground. So we give them the opportunity to see something that hasn't been exposed for 100 million years, and that thrill, that experience behind it is something that people love. And then obviously the added bonuses of visiting the museum, and we have a day off, we call it, and we send them up to the museum to enjoy our museum and sort of see the other side of things if they haven't been there already. And then we have science lectures. It's a very sciencey driven exploration kind of participant program is great fun.
Yeah, great. It sounds like a really cool way for people who are interested in dinosaurs and paleontology to get a little bit of a hands-on experience.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Now, this year's dig is coming up very soon, isn't it?
It is, yes.
But unfortunately for anyone listening, it's already oversubscribed. So how could people get involved in the future?
Well, I'm a big advocate of keeping a waiting list, because you never know what will happen around the corner. So if anyone is interested in applying for a Digger Dino, just send it through to our bookings team and we will put you on a waiting list and we'll be in contact when a position's available.
Great. And aside from that program, I know the museum needs supporters all over the place because you're a non-profit independent institution. So how can people support the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum?
I think becoming a member of the museum there's lots of different avenues really, but membership is important to us. Obviously building our society, getting our information out there, and our members are our advocates. So I think that having a big membership base is important. And I think the other involvement is that without people prepping in our lab, because that's another participant program that we have, we wouldn't be able to uncover the dinosaurs either. So we're heavily reliant on volunteers or people to come in and help us with that sort of stuff. And then, of course, paleotourism is a really big part of this museum's funding. So
yeah, absolutely. I know the museum, if you sign up as a subscriber, you get a print copy of the annual journal.
Yes.
Which is a fantastic publication. It's really worth looking into. And of course, you're out in Winton in Western Queensland. What's it like being out there and the links to the community of Winton? How does that work? What's the relationship between the town and the museum?
Yep. Well, what's wonderful about Winton is that it is a small community and they get behind you. So there's a lot of support for the museum in Winton town, and obviously we encourage all Winton locals to come out to see us as we grow and get them to experience. We're holding a community day on Easter Saturday, or 16th of April, so something that we do every year, and it's a free family morning, little bit of an egg and spoon race, so get the kids involved. So I think we have a good relationship with the town here.
Yeah, great. You mentioned a couple of ways in which the museum comes into its items, and you have amassed a very large collection of Australian dinosaur bones. I think I saw somewhere it's the biggest collection of Australian dinosaur bones in the world already, and you've got that together in a pretty short period of time. Given that volume, how do you start to make decisions about what to focus on in displays and what to write up and do some research on and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think when you look at our collection and the amount of stuff we're pulling out of the ground, it's pretty easy to prioritise. We're obviously consistently looking for something different. So if we were randomly, the property owner was checking for weeds on his property and found a pterosaur. And, that wiped out all of our priorities, and oh my goodness, we've got an Australian pterosaur.
Got to jump at a pterosaur.
Something we've got to jump into.
That's the first Australian pterosaur discovered, wasn't it?
It wasn't the first, no. There were a couple of two or three others. Yep. And there's been a new one just released from Dinosaurs Corner just recently. But it's just exciting. So I think to answer the question about how we prioritise, I think it's what's brand new, it's what's exciting. And places like Ferrodraco, Confractosuchus, the little crocodile, Cretaceous crocodile, he's really cool. He's a cool little critter, and it's taken a long time for us from finding him, or finding it, and prepping it and getting it to a display point and getting it published. It took a better part of 6 to 8 years. So
there was a bit of news about a bit of interest in that one, the crocodile.
Yeah.
It had the dinosaur in its stomach, didn't it?
Yes, small ornithopod. It was his last meal. So even that's cool. So I think, I'm sitting here getting excited telling you about it. So, it's sort of how we start to prioritise what we work on. Yeah.
Great. How did you get into your role? Could you tell me a little bit more about your background? I think it's a bit of an unusual route, right? So
it's a very, very unusual road. I started with this museum not as a paid employee. I was working for a subcontractor, Outback Hobby Tours, as the dinosaur dig cook. So I cooked for the dinosaur diggers back in 2003 for a week. And then I was the cook for a couple of years. And then I went overseas and came back as a full-time employee as a fossil technician. And I did tiny little tours in the fossil containers out on Belmont Station and did the safety inductions and sort of helped Naomi, who was in charge of the lab back then, prepping fossils. Had a great time. And I've just walked the line. I've grown with the museum. And I have built my passion on collection, on fossils, that lab work, that science. And I sit here today as a collection manager. Just sort of walked the path and grew with it.
I should circle back. So you began as a cook. So maybe people think the Digger Dino, it's camping. What kind of experience would you actually get?
Well, the Digger Dino experience is pretty great fun, actually. We put the people they're accommodated in the shearers' quarters. So we go in the week before and sparkle up the shearers' quarters and get them clean and tidy and put in some pretty 5-star single beds. And then we have a cook on site. We employ a cook, and they eat until they can't eat anymore, and we dig until we physically can't dig anymore. It's great.
You've got to have fuel for the digging.
Got to have fuel. Oh, I agree.
So it's although you're out in the dirt all day, it might not be as messy as some people might be expecting. So
not really. Every site is different. So the site that we're going back to in May, there is one part of it's quite fast-paced. So, excuse me, we know where the bones are. We're very familiar with what we're getting into there. Then the other side, which we've referred to as hotspot, is slow. The matrix is just that little bit harder. It's a bit dry, and it's full of teeth and crocodile bones, and it's just not for everybody. So we call them fragglers. So people who just like to enjoy going millimetre by millimetre to find these little tiny things. And then we've got a sieving station.
What kind of teeth are you hoping to dig up on this one?
Well, we have already found sauropod teeth, so isolated sauropod teeth, which are actually extremely rare to find in Australia. I can confirm that we actually have part of, it's called the premaxilla. It's like the front of the snout of a sauropod, and we've got numerous crocodile teeth. We've referred to some of them as piscivore teeth, and that's, something, a fish-eating animal, but it could well be a crocodile. We're not really sure. There's little crocodile vertebrae. There's lots of little things, little pine cones, as big as your fingernail, some smaller than your fingernail, little funny fruit seed pods. So there's lots of different things. If you can imagine that area being like a corner of a creek bed that's just been slowly jammed by water, and sort of
lots of stuff has washed into there over.
Yeah, it's like a big debris bank. It's just amazing.
What era is it from?
You're looking at Cretaceous. It's Winton Formation. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And I guess that's the main formation nearby to where the museum is.
Yes. Yeah.
Fantastic. Your background is a little bit unusual, perhaps, for a collections manager, and I know you said to me that you have some friends around the world and in other museums who are also collection managers. How did they come into the role, and how does that differ from you?
Well, the two collection managers that I know are good friends of mine, and I guess the difference is, you know, what the museums represent. So, you know, one's heavily in geosciences and structured a little bit different, but the role's quite similar. And I guess the other person is, you know, in charge and got lots of volunteers behind them doing all the data stuff, whereas I'm doing it all myself, and I've got a handful of people on my team that give me a hand on the side. And I'm just starting to get some volunteers and some university interns, which is great.
That was one thing I was going to raise next. Now, obviously, you basically trained up on the job, and lots of other people might start that way as well, and certainly you use volunteers, and you mentioned interns. So what approach does the museum take to helping to develop a future sort of workforce in the field?
Yeah. Look, we have a really... I believe this museum has a really good approach for students, and you know, we're encouraging people to come out and experience. And I think our work experience students can choose from. So if I'm talking school grades, so the higher grades 11s and 12s, you know, we can give them hospitality experience. We can give them that collection management, lab, paleontology sort of experience. But then you get up to your university students, the internships, and, you know, we can get them into the heavier collection management and right into the nitty gritty as to why we accession and not accession and donations and all this sort of stuff. So I think our role for them is really important, and the museum is what we're about, is giving people that experience.
Fantastic. And related to that, I guess, we've talked about you being deeply embedded in the Winton community, you know, embedded in these networks of people who are interested in the field. What are your relationships with other museums? And you mentioned one from Canada that you're kind of modelling yourselves on and making, that might be you putting words into your mouth, but sort of becoming the Australian version of, I think you said. So what's the relationship like with other museums and around the world?
You know, I think we have, for who we, you know, work with prior to still doing it now, I think we have good relationships. It's something that David, our executive chairman, is really passionate about, is building those relationships, and I guess using that as a guiding light. That's what we'll try and achieve. So I think that I think what I'm trying to say is that it's important for us to build these relationships so that we can, you know, we can all showcase what we need to showcase, basically.
Museums are often linked with galleries, archives and libraries as the GLAM sector. What similarities or differences do you think there are? I guess there's a kind of knowledge institutions or cultural knowledge institutions. What sort of similarities are there? Do you learn things from related institutions, or do you sort of stick with the museums?
No, you know, I guess, well, it depends who's talking here, but for me, I because I'm building archives and I'm building our database at the moment, I'm open to any suggestions. I've done a lot of research leading up to these bigger projects at the museum, you know, even as far as establishing a library. They're all still very new for us, and it's still very progressive. You know, so I've had to throw myself into the Dewey system, and for me to do that, I've actually physically gone to a library and asked questions.
Yep.
And so I guess we heavily rely on the knowledge of others to help me and the management team build this museum. So
fantastic. What are some of them? If someone was to say to you, okay, you've got, I know there's a 1,000 answers floating around in your head here, but what's the single proudest thing or the best thing you've achieved, do you think, in your time with the Australian Age of Dinosaurs?
Oh, heavens.
That's a question without notice, I know.
That's a big question. Good grief. You know, there's so many amazing moments. I think the highlight, or the thing that probably keeps me fully tied to this museum is how productive we are, and being that productive, and I'm probably more referring to the fossil lab, being more productive and discovering more and getting those research papers out is something that I thrive on, and that gets me excited. I mean, you can wake up, come to work, and not even expect that you're going to hold a dentary of a dinosaur in your hand that day. And it's just an amazing feeling that we're not only experiencing that ourselves, but we're giving that experience to others. And it's just a line of passion, really, and it just continues, you know?
Yeah, great.
I'm getting teary just thinking about it.
Look, I can see your passion for the museum, Trish. I think that's so brilliant, and I really appreciate your time today. So the last question I wanted to ask is, perhaps it might be an obvious one for a dino podcast, but what's your favourite dinosaur?
Well, I got asked this recently, and I'm a bit torn. I have to say Australorvanator, and because Australorvanator or Banjo started my career in this museum. And I think he would have caused a bit of mischief, the whole theropod, back in the day when he was running around Winton area, and it kind of matches my personality, I think.
Can you describe Australorvanator?
Australorvanator wintonensis is one of the largest or most complete theropods here in Australia. He's meat-eating, carnivorous, probably very much an opportunist, and he's got really big hand claws and nice long cassowary type legs that'll run nice and fast.
You've got quite the range of dinosaurs up there. You've got some theropods and the pterosaurs, and you've got, no, pterosaurs aren't dinosaurs. Somebody's going to tell me off for that one, but the crocodiles and the sauropods. Is there anything you haven't found yet that you really hope, we've got to add that to the collection? I guess a genus, obviously, you're hoping it's a new species, and you've mostly described, I think, new species.
Yeah, so I think in the Winton area, I probably need to be specific there. I know that it's impossible for us to find one, but I have to say it. I want to find a centrosaur, but I know we probably would never do that or ever find one. But it would be really nice to put an ankylosaur in amongst the mix of our environmental critters, and like an ornithopod or something like that, little coelurosaur. Yeah.
There are some, there's a very cool Australian ankylosaur called Minmi. He comes from a little further north, I think, than
in Richmond.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I know I said the question about your favourite dinosaur was going to be the last question, but thank you for indulging me a little longer. Trish Sloan from the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thanks to Trish Sloan from the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum in Winton, Queensland. To support the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum or find out more, go to australianageofdinosaurs.com or look them up on social media. Thank you for listening to the Fossils and Fiction podcast, produced by me, Travis Holland, with the support of Charles Sturt University. The podcast theme music is Sonora by Quincas Morea via the YouTube audio library. Find more content on our social media channels: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram and TikTok. Show notes are available on the website fossilsfiction.co. You can subscribe to the podcast on all major podcasting platforms.